Okay, so I believe we were talking about the natural conversational read. And as a voice talent, what you have to understand is that when a client or an agent asks you for that type of read, what the client really wants is they want a believable read, not a contrived, not you trying to sound like something that you're not. A natural read can come in a variety of flavors. It can be anything from sarcastic to urgent to casual to empathetic to sensual to fill in the blank. It could be 100, 1,000 different varieties. The key is that it comes from your experience and that it's you, which is why I always talk about, communicating like an ACE, ACE, authenticity, always you, from conviction, a point of belief that this is something that you really believe. And if you don't, you need to substitute in your mind something with which you do believe, so that emotionally you're communicating a vibe that is believable, and that you have emotion, that you would express it the same way you would in a real situation with another person. So don't get confused by directions that say, well, we're looking for conversational style, like John Krasinski from the Esurance ads. That's a point of reference from somebody. Don't make the mistake of trying to get into voice impersonation, because believe me, and I tell you this from experience, because I've done it, I've tried it. I tried it for a long time and it doesn't work. When you try to impersonate other people, even when you're good, that person's already got, they're already around. Nobody's looking for another one of them. What they're looking for is you being authentically you. And let me just add one other bit of advice from a performance standpoint. When you're trying to find yourself, your natural conversational style, whatever the context may be, the voice, your true voice, your voice of confidence and authority and belief, comes from your chest, usually, and not your throat. Here's one of the first things that I notice, Fred, whenever I'm coaching or working with a voice talent, is that usually, when somebody's nervous, they will speak from the top of their throat. Their voice goes up like this. So when they start to read, it's from up here. And when you're talking from up here, that's the voice of disbelief. That's the voice of unbelief, of unsureness, of a lack of confidence. But if you just relax and allow your voice to come from your chest, you speak with confidence and authority, regardless of the emotion. And by the way, the C in ACE is conviction. Authentic, conviction, and emotion. Now that's a quick overview, but if you just remember this, relate it to your experience. If it's an ad that calls for a sense of urgency, an act now kind of script, what do you talk when you're in that kind of a situation? When you're in a scenario where you need somebody to act on what you have to say now, how do you do that? You talk faster. What kind of excitement do you talk with? When you're asked to do a script that calls for the casual guy next door talking over the fence, when you're hanging out talking to your friends over the fence, how do you talk? What kind of energy do you project with? What's the pitch of your voice? Those are your cues. Those are the things that will guide you. And by slowing down, relaxing, speaking from your chest, and not from your throat, not up here, that will allow you to begin to relax into your own personality. Let me pause there, Fred. If you have any questions or so far if there's anything I need to further explain.
Yeah, I think it was. We got a comment from Gladys, which I kind of like. She said, "There's a bright side to the technical issues. Switching to the phone illustrates just how important having a good mic is. Bill sounds so much different over the phone."
Yeah, in real life, I have a high squeaky voice. You can put me behind a microphone, and all of a sudden, I'm a world-class talent.
Okay, so authenticity, conviction, emotion, and now should we? Are we at a point where we should? I should open it up for questions.
Let's do that now.
Okay, folks, you're free to ask the questions. I really am not going to go backwards and look at previous comments or questions, so put them in now on this issue. So what would you like people to ask you about? Okay, well, Stephen's asking, so speaking from the chest, we are looking for a deeper timbre to the voice? Is that what you're saying?
Now, what I'm looking for is a natural timbre. Don't manipulate your voice down. And let me give you an example. Let's say I just read a script. This happens all the time, and I've done this for a long time. And I make a good living doing this, and I have to work at this every single day. Let's say I have an audition for a script. It doesn't matter what it is. I read the script, I go back, And as I listen to it, what I notice, usually my first read is usually up here. There's a sense that there's a little bit of tension in my throat. There's a little bit of excitement here. I mean, the excitement comes from the adrenaline. And so everything's pushed up into my throat. And then I realize, okay, I've got to drop my voice into my chest, meaning the voice that I use when I don't have tension, when I'm not nervous, when I don't have performance anxiety. That voice comes from down here. This is the voice of confidence, of authenticity, and conviction. When I believe what I'm talking about, this is where I talk from, my chest. There might be a sense of urgency and intensity. There might even be a sense of excitement, but it comes from my chest, not from my throat. You hear the difference?
Yeah, and Bill, just again, Jim, just to clarify, Jim was asking, Jim McDonald, whether or not you recommend mimicking other voice talents or using a fake it till you make it as a strategy. I think you'd address that, which is don't try to imitate anyone, correct?
Yes. I would strongly suggest not, because this is coming from a voice from a guy who tried that for a number of years with very little success. But at the top, at the upper echelon of competition, when you get into the bigger voice jobs, it becomes absolutely imperative that you quit impersonating other people. You've got to be yourself.
And
you don't want to do $20, $30, $50 scripts for the rest of your life. This is what you're going to learn.
Okay, and John Knowles is asking, which I think is a good question, what's a good way to find the keyword or phrase or subtext of the script in order to have that ACE component sort of kick in?
Well, there's almost always, I'm always looking for a word or a phrase. Within the script, there's almost always a phrase, sometimes it's just a word, that really encapsulates the subtext or the underlying current, the motivation, the feeling. I'm always looking for that phrase. And let me back up here a little bit. A lot of this comes by doing. In other words, I'll be working with somebody with a talent, and I'll say, how did you figure all of that out so fast? It's because I work with thousands of scripts. Literally, I've worked with thousands and thousands of scripts. This comes through repetition.
Okay, quick one. Yeah, that's good.
What's that?
No, I mean, we're just going to keep these answers short and pithy so we can get in as many questions as possible.
Okay.
I know you could talk for an hour on each of these. Christopher McHale is asking, I find that too much thinking also affects the natural read. In other words, don't work the copy, let it flow. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. Somebody asked me the other night, well, shouldn't I figure out what words and phrases to color? And I said, no. First thing you want to figure out is what's your emotional response to it. What's the emotional response? And then just do it. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Don't overanalyze.
Okay, Eric is asking, a client of his who's also a speech pathologist told him that he has a vocal fry, F-R-Y. Have you ever heard of that? And would a chest voice prevent that from happening? What is a chest? What's a vocal fry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not a speech therapist, so I don't know that I'm even qualified to answer this. I don't know for sure, but I think it's where your voice almost makes a fizzle sound in a certain register. And in terms of how to address that, that is something you would have to speak with your speech therapist. My guess is it may be different for different people as well. So that's more of a physical thing that I would not be qualified to address.
Now, Steve is asking a question which we may not, Steve, be able to get given the quality of our connection here with the phone. But Steve says, can you read a short piece to illustrate natural versus unnatural or forced?
Absolutely. Let me just dig into my
bag of copy
email account here. Find some copy. Hold on here. Bear with me just a second.
Yeah. While you're doing that, Adam is asking, is this much different than diaphragm breathing for performance?
Yeah, what I'm talking about, I'm talking about something. Yeah, this is a different issue. This has to do with tension, the tension in your body. And when adrenaline flows, we tend to push our voice up into our throat, and we talk in a higher register. We're not even realizing it. Most of us don't even realize when we do it. And that's why it takes a conscious effort to say, okay, I'm just going to relax and allow my voice to come from where it naturally comes from, which is, you may breathe through the diaphragm, but those vocal, the vocal cords or the resonance comes from your chest. And I found a script, by the way.
Okay.
Okay, I haven't even read this yet, but let me go ahead and I'm going to give it a first read through. I think maybe it's for a chiropractor.
Okay.
So So I'm going to do a first read through, and this might be what a typical first read would be when there's a little bit of adrenaline flowing, and my voice is pitched up a little bit. Here we go. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Oh, let me back up. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Let our licensed chiropractors relieve your everyday aches and pains in a way that works for everyday life. The joint chiropractic. Relief on so many levels. Get started today with your initial consultation, exam and adjustment for just $19. Okay. My feedback for that read is, whoa, relax. Let's make it sound like you're just simply hanging out at a coffee shop talking to a friend. That's my direction for myself.
Okay.
Here's my second read. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Let our licensed chiropractors relieve your everyday aches and pains in a way that works for everyday life. The joint chiropractic. Relief on so many levels. Get started today with your initial consultation. Exam and adjustment for just $19.
Yeah, much
See the
more.
difference between those two?
Yeah, much more relaxed, and it doesn't seem like you're trying to push it or sell it.
Yes, that's a great way to put it, Fred. I'm not trying to sell it. And when your voice tenses up, it sounds like you're selling it.
Okay, Stephen's got a question here. I find when I try to be conversational, I enunciate less. So how does one enunciate correctly and still give the conversational style? I think that I think I know where he's coming from here. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it sure does. And let me just share a very quick story, which will I think answer the question very well. I was once on a commercial. I was doing a commercial with the producer, and I did my first read of the script. And he said, "Do you do a lot of narration work?" And I said, "Yes, I do. As a matter of fact." He said, "Quit over enunciating." He said, "Just relax." He said, "Don't make it so perfect." And that has been, I get that advice from a lot of people, a lot of directors say, you know what, don't worry about over-enunciating. This is not about how good you talk. It's about how great you communicate. And so if you swallow a D or you don't get a hard P, usually that's a good thing. Now, that doesn't mean, it doesn't give you license to be sloppy. But this is not about how well you articulate. You have to be understood, but it's about how well you communicate.
Got it.
It's more of an emotional issue.
Got it. And Neil is asking a good question. Neil says, what about the client that says less William Shatner and more James Earl Jones? That happened to me. Being myself went out the window.
Well, I'd say, in the most respectful way, we'll give it to James Earl Jones. Yeah, I mean, with all respect, for me, I'm not even close to James Earl Jones. And I know myself well enough to know that I can't do that, and nor am I going to try. I'll never get the job. If what they're saying is, give me an authoritative read, well, that's different. But me being authoritative is going to be different from James Earl Jones. So let me give you a little bit of this script, if I may, Fred, as in a more authoritative read. Let's say more like a medical professional speaking to you. That would be the context that I would use. I'm a doctor talking to you. So here we go. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Let our licensed chiropractors relieve your everyday aches and pains in a way that works for everyday life. The joint chiropractic. Relief on so many levels. There, I'll stop there. But that was me being authoritative, not trying to do an impersonation of James Earl Jones.
Gotcha. Now, Leanna's asking, before you do a read, do you tell a story in order to project your natural voice before you read the script?
No, but, that brings up a good question. I do have an exercise that I do and that I teach my students to do, and let me share it with you. I call it overtraining, and I remember when I used to work in instructional design, one of the techniques, and actors use it. They were called different things in different industries, but the idea is to get you to do whatever you're going to do it over the top, to do it faster in a more exaggerated way, so that when you go back to do what you were going to do before, it becomes more natural and fluid. So here's my suggestion. The first time you read the script, read it in a way that's really over the top and crazy and out of your comfort zone. Read it like a pirate. Read it like Mickey the Mouse. Read it like the big monster truck full guy. Do something that's completely stupid and out of context. And the more uncomfortable it feels for you, the better your second read would be. For some reason, Fred, doing that kind of clears the emotional cobwebs. It kind of ties us up from being ourselves. And once you do something really bizarre and over the top, when you go back to read it again, typically it's a much more natural read.
Yeah, and you did that with me when I came out to see you, and that worked very well.
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, yeah, I did. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Tom is asking, Tom Conklin asks, the direction I see often is upbeat and conversational. How do you sound conversational in an upbeat tempo?
Well, something you have to, at some point in time, you have to come to grips with the fact that most clients really they don't know what they want. They know what they want when they hear it. And that's not a criticism. That's just the way we all are. You know, in their mind, the way they would define it, okay, yeah, we want it to be real, conversational, but we want it to be upbeat, meaning they want some energy to it. So then the question becomes, for you, Tom, what do you sound like when you're being conversational yet excited? So for me, let me go back to the script again, since I'm using this. Let me read a little bit of this chiropractic script. This would be me being conversational but upbeat. In other words, me being conversational but how I would sound excited. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Let a licensed chiropractor relieve your everyday aches and pains in a way that works for everyday life. The joint chiropractic. Relief on so many levels.
Yeah.
So that would be me being conversational upbeat.
You know, tagged onto that, Richard's got a really good suggestion here. He says one way he shifts into, quote, a more conversational tone is to start out by saying, before he gets into the copy, sort of a pre-roll so he adds a couple of words to the script to make it more conversational.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. A few other things you can add to that would be if you're, let's say, for instance, you're reading a script and I like to imagine the person that I'm talking to. So I'll pick a face, a name, somebody I know, and you could start off by using their name. Hey, Jeff, let me tell you something. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? Or you maybe even finding a line from the script that kind of encompasses the emotion of the script. Like, for instance, and I'll start with that, and then I'll back up to the beginning. Like, relief on so many levels. Chronic backache relief. What would that free you up to do? So there are different variations on that theme, but they all work really well.
Cool. And by the way, folks, if you're asking questions, just like I asked Bill to keep his answers short and pithy, your questions that go on for 5 or 6 lines are difficult for me to pick because of all the verbiage involved. FYI. And Adam is saying that he uses the same technique, by the way, with his acting students, which is the exaggerated read, to get them sort of thinking about doing it the right way, which Adam, knowing a little bit about the whole acting business, I can see where that works. Steve is asking, I assume Bill's years of experience and thousands of scripts helped train him to pick up on the emotion words or phrases. How did he start finding these or this? I mean, how did you sort of discover which words to sort of pick up and sort of add a little bit of spice to?
Okay, well, what I do, I look at a script overall, and I just, the first question I ask myself is, okay, so what's the emotion here? Now, let's go back to this chiropractic script again, since I have it up here. As I'm glancing through this, we're talking about, it's all about pain relief. As a matter of fact, the big phrase in here is relief on so many levels. So for me, the word is relief. We all know what it feels like to be in pain and then to find relief. What does that feel like? So in my mind, I would think of a time. That's how I'd find the word, and then I could just associate a time in my life where I felt some intense pain, and then I experienced relief, and then that's what would guide me. But by just looking at the script, I see the relief on so many levels. To me, that jumps out and says, that's what this is about. Backache relief. The word relief comes up twice in the script. Three times in the script.
Now, Tom brings something up here, which he says that for him, that acting classes are really helping. Would you find that for most VO artists that would be true or not?
I think it would be. Now, let me tell you, I've never had an acting class, so I can't speak from firsthand experience. But from those who have, and everything that I've heard from those who have, I think they would definitely be helpful, because it's really, I think acting as well as voiceover is a process of finding yourself within the context of whatever you're doing. Whatever it calls for. it's not about faking your way through. Well, maybe it is to a certain extent, but it's about understanding your own reactions to these things and expressing authentic emotions. And I think that, to a certain degree, that is acting.
Yeah, I got you, and I would agree. By the way, Roger's asking something, and Roger, your question here on the lemon water. He says, is lemon water helpful to drink before a read? Let me just tell you, Roger, that for many, many years, when I was out on the speaking circuit doing lots of seminars and speeches, I would drink lemon water like all day long, like gallons of it. And as a result, whenever I went out on the road, I never got sick because I think I was giving myself time-release vitamin C. But I guess really for our purposes here, Bill, he's asking, what do you do before a read? You drink like 18 cups of coffee a day, so I'm assuming that's what you're drinking.
I do. I am. I'm right now, as a matter of fact. I like coffee, and it's hot, and it loosens up my throat. And I hum in the morning to loosen up my vocal cords. I'll hum as deeply as I can, and then I'll hum up the scales, as high as I can, just to loosen everything up. But I've never had lemon water, so I can't really speak to that specifically. But I do like hot liquids. For me,
it's kind of funny because the guy that I think we're going to have to do a seminar with is my buddy Roger Burgraff, who I know from my speaking days. And Roger did a program called The Care and Feeding of the Speaker Voice, and we're going to have him on. You're going to have him on one of these at some point. And Roger always used to say there were certain no-nos having to do with before you speak, and one of them was caffeine. So I think you've busted that myth. Let's see here.
I'm breaking all the rules.
Exactly. Yet doing it your way. You know what? Mike is saying that improv is more helpful than straight acting. Mike, I did 20 years of improv in New York. I agree. To me, that was helpful. I guess everybody, finds their own path on how to do this properly. But I think that that's, another good idea. I've often, there's one, Greg is saying, I've often seen direction that says, quote, conversational and not announcery, seeming to make the two opposites. Would you agree?
What was the opposite? Announcery, and what was the other aspect?
Conversational versus announcery.
Yeah. You know what the client is saying is they want real versus fake. They don't want you to talk like this and sound like, they don't want you to manipulate your voice to sound like what you think a professional would sound like. They want you to be genuine. And you can be genuine in a broad variety of ways. But that's the way, remember this, clients, that's the way they express themselves because they're not sure how else to say it. They want genuine. They don't want fake. And that's their way of saying, give me the real you, not some fake version of you.
And I think that John also makes a good point, John Grimes, where he says, would you agree that comes down to enjoying or having fun being the voice the client wants to hear? He says that tends to work for me.
Yeah, well, I think when you're in that mode, it helps. You're probably closer to being genuine than at any other time. So I think that definitely.
Now, remind me again, because earlier while you were fixing some of the technical issues, I mentioned people that on the voiceoverrevolutionevent.com site, and remind me because I'm forgetting a little bit. When we did record this in Vegas. And people who want to can click here to attend and then put in, by the way, when you do that, you put in that, what is it again, the 50, they put in, I'm going to order two of these.
50 off.
What's that?
50 off.
Okay, so if I put it in here, folks, let me just watch here, 50 off, OFF. I'm going to apply that. And yes, it's $147 instead of $197. So when we did this particular program, How much time did we devote to some of these reads?
It was, as I recall, it was the first morning from the beginning of the morning until lunchtime, so several hours.
Yeah, so there was plenty of that as well as a lot of the stuff on marketing. Yeah. So if you're wondering what's contained in this material,
right.
I think that's it. We divided it up into 4 sections, correct?
There was social media, and then there was a studio. Tim Tippett talked about getting the most out of your home studio, and we talked about developing your website. Yeah, we covered just about everything.
Got it. But there was a fair amount of performance as well. I remember that.
Yeah. There was I think 3 hours worth.
Good. Okay. So in other words, if this is something that you end up getting, you'll get a lot of training in that area as well. Okay. Good. So now back to the questions. Let me just take here. Okay, so Keith is asking, Keith Copeland says, when a script spec calls for a reading in the style of a famous actor, i.e. George Clooney, what should you do to give an effective read while being yourself? So if it calls for in the style of X or Y.
And you're going to see that all the time. Every audition now references an actor, and all I can tell you is that for several years I tried my best to impersonate all of those actors with very little success. What I've learned to do is use that as a reference. So, in other words, what I'll do is I'll go to the YouTube video. Usually, there's the YouTube video of the commercial to watch and to listen. So I'm not listening to what George Clooney sounds like. What I'm listening for beyond that is the undercurrent of the script. What's the emotion? What are we selling? What feeling are we selling? A feeling of safety and security, a feeling of excitement. What is the feeling? And how can I express that in a way that's authentic and genuine to me, so that I'm not so focused on how I say words like George Clooney, but how can I express the same emotion? And we're like snowflakes in that regard. They're all going to be slightly different, but it's going to be unique to you. And either the client will like you or they won't. But what I figured out, clients don't like me for everything. They're not going to like you for everything either. But you stand a much better chance of getting the job if it's genuine and authentic to you.
Yeah, and I think that what if I understand you correctly, because again, you're sort of teaching me these things as well as I start to do some of these, is that the more you try and the closer you come to being your authentic self, the better your chances are for getting the job, although that certainly doesn't guarantee you will, because you just may not have the voice the client wants.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we have no control over who they pick, but I do know that if you're asking how do I bring excitement or urgency or compassion to the script, your chances are much better, much better.
This is something you can probably help Kent Lefevers with as well, since you do a lot of narration. He says, how can I keep up my emotion and motivation over the course of a long read so I don't slip into quote-unquote reading mode?
Well, and I'm not sure how you define long read, but let's just say, I'm going to assume that we're talking longer than a commercial.
I'm thinking like an audiobook.
30 minutes. Like an audiobook. Well, for me, I do everything. I have a very short attention span, so I usually don't read for more than 15, 20 minutes at a time. So by taking frequent breaks, it allows me to regroup and to kind of recenter myself and to get to where I need to be. I frequently go back and listen to the beginning of my recordings to reference how I started, what the tone was, what the feeling was, and then I'll use that as a reference throughout the project. So I would say frequent breaks, reference the beginning of your read to make sure that you stay on track.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good suggestion, because that's I think that you always start out presumably with a certain sort of baseline level of enthusiasm or excitement for that particular script, and if you do take frequent breaks, I would think you might worry about sounding kind of a little bit different at different portions of the script.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so let's see here. What else? So Roger, so being relaxed, be yourself, put your emotions into it, and make it believable. That's his summation. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. Easier said than done, but that's the holy grail right there.
Got it. So Roger, that would be the one here. Let me see if I can find some other things here that are. I'm trying to make sure that I try and cover as many of these as I can. Let's see. Anybody have any other questions? Roger says thanks there. I'm just trying to make sure that what I'm trying to do is select questions that are, okay. Any trick to remaining, Steve says, any trick to remaining conversational in front of a producer versus the bedroom closet?
Now, it's tough because, there's no doubt that's a whole other level of anxiety. And, deep breaths. And just try to imagine yourself that you're sitting in your closet or your home studio recording. That's tough. And here's the thing, as within any performance thing, experience will help you. I remember my first session in the studio with the producer. I was terrified. And today, I don't really think that much of it when I do it. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, and here...
But that just came through repetition and experience.
Excellent. Okay, Celia, a little bit earlier, was asking this. I think it's relevant here as well. She says, I think another challenge is a script that, while well written, is not always well suited for voiceover. So a lot of times you may have to be dealing with writing that you wouldn't have chosen that writer yourself, right, Bill?
All the time. I would say most of the scripts are like that the exception is the very, 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 very well written script. And so, it doesn't negate the fact that you still have to be yourself, but you just have to learn to navigate through some really bumpy terrain along the way. So, it's not easy. If this is easy, everybody would be doing it. And part of the challenge is copy. We all get a lot of bad copy. And you bring yourself to the script and you simply do your best. I mean, I don't mean that as a cop-out answer, but that's all you can do.
Yeah, and now Christopher McHale, I love this, Chris. This is pretty funny. He says he got this direction. Big, excited sports announcer, over-the-top NFL film style delivery, yet you should keep it natural. How do you reconcile these two ideas?
Yeah, you can't. But yet that's so typical. It's not unusual to get, what seems to be 10 or 15 adjectives describing, but yet, in opposition to each other. Again, that just goes back to the idea that the client doesn't even really know. They have an idea in their head, but they know it when they hear it. So I take my best guess, and then I listen to feedback. If the client says, no, really, here's what we were thinking. Okay, great. Well, now we've got something to work with. And then I'll adjust accordingly. But now in an audition situation, you don't get a second chance.
Now Max is really going off the rails here. Max says, would you ever deviate from the script? I don't think so. Not if you want to get the job, right?
No, I never deviate from the script.
Yeah.
Not in an audition, anyhow.
Yeah, you're not the writer. You're just the mouthpiece, right?
That's right. You got it.
Okay, so now, again, one of the things that we're going to try and do every time we do these is to find a way to highlight something that will really sort of dovetail in nicely with what we're talking about. So again, why is our topic today relevant to what we did for 2 days in Vegas, and why would people benefit from that? Just explain that to folks again.
Yeah, well, that's really the way we started the seminar or the workshop in Vegas, because it really begins with performance. I always say product precedes marketing. Your product is what you do when you're behind the microphone. And so the best marketing in the world will not overcome a bad product. You've got to have a good product as well as good, outstanding marketing. So this is where it all begins. And as demonstrated by the questions that we got tonight, Fred, this is what everybody's asking for. Everybody's saying, I want conversational. The hard thing to interpret is, what does that mean? And so, and this is something that I've wrestled with for a number of years. And, and I'm much better at it now than I used to be. I book a lot more work now than I used to. And it came through finally understanding this was not about me sounding like George Clooney. This is about finding out how Bill DeWeese would respond in this situation. And that's what you've got to ask yourself. It's all about context, the context of the script, and how you fit into it, how you would honestly respond in that situation. That's the only chance you have of really being successful as a performer is learning to do that. And it takes time. You've got to wrestle with scripts. And you have to wrestle with them and wrestle with them and wrestle with them. And over time, you begin to develop the ability to do that. You get better with it.
Bill, the one thing, though, that was brought up at that event that I thought was pretty important also is, let's assume you were the best conversational voiceover artist on the planet, yet you had poor or no marketing skills. You would remain without money, correct?
You would remain without money. I talk to people like that all the time, who are represented by some of the best talent agents in America, and they don't work because they have no idea how to market themselves. You've got to have both. You've got to have product, you have to be able to perform, and you've got to market.
Yep. And so that's, I think I don't remember what percentage, but we spent at, not exactly half and half, but there was certainly a pretty good distribution when we did this event, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a really good balance of both ends of that spectrum and a lot in between.
Okay, so you know what? Eddie's asking a good question. What made you, meaning Bill, want to start these webinars and go into the coaching direction? How do you balance it all? Boy, that's a relevant question.
And this may not be a short, pithy answer, but let me explain this, because I think it's a really good question. And I often refer to myself as the reluctant voiceover coach, because originally this was not my plan. I was a very happy voiceover talent, and there's nothing I enjoy more than sitting in my booth all day and recording. And it's very lucrative, and no problem with that. It started with a newspaper article that came out locally about me, with a big picture of me in my studio, and I started getting phone calls and emails from around the country from my little local newspaper. It was weird. And people started bugging me for information. When I say bug, I don't mean that in a negative way. They called, phone, hey, help me. And I kept putting them off. And then one day I got a marketing email from a voiceover coach, and I just thought the whole thing seemed a little questionable. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do it right. And so I started doing some research on the internet. I thought, I got to find somebody who can help me to market myself via the internet. And it's funny, I'm great when it comes to voiceover marketing, but when it comes to more the internet-based information marketing, not my expertise. That's why I contacted Fred. And that's how Fred and I really became partners in crime on this whole thing.
Now, hey, Bill.
Fred has helped me to build a platform.
It's been 4 years this Christmas since you came to one of the boot camps. How early before then did you start looking, just out of curiosity?
Oh, it was almost immediately. I mean, when I contacted you, I don't even remember the first email that I sent you. I think it was in November.
Oh, okay.
That's when I decided, and you had emailed me back and said, let's talk. And it was immediately. There was hardly any lag there at all.
Now, quickly skipping back to one of the questions, Doug Brown is asking, do you think that having a producer or listener with you in the audition would be helpful?
Yeah, if they know what they're doing, absolutely. And my daughter Mallory helps me with that occasionally. Usually she's busy doing other stuff, but once in a while when I'm really stumped, I'll bring her down and say, listen to this, what do you think?
And she'll give you feedback.
She's skilled in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your kids will give you feedback. They'll say exactly what they think.
Okay, so now, and Greg, and we'll finish up with this question because we're getting to the end of our time. Greg is asking, so Bill, when somebody's advocating, are you advocating that we not shy away from auditions that request a specific celebrity type read? And I think your answer is no, because basically the client really doesn't know what they want, correct?
Right, that's right. They heard something they liked, but they're going to like, they'll like you being yourself. Don't shy away from it. Just my I guess mandate, my challenge for you is to figure out your response to that script. How would you sound in that context? Not how would George Clooney sound or Susan Sarandon, but how would you sound? How would you respond to that script? And that's, when you learn to do that, and you will through practice, you'll start booking more work. I'm confident of that.
Excellent. Okay, well that's great, Bill. And again, for those of you who are who are interested, write at the voiceoverrevolutionevent.com, put in the 50 off, and you'll get that for a lot less money. Bill, thanks a lot for your time. Sorry we had some technical problems, folks, but we will see you next time. And Bill, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, everyone.
You got it.